Hi everyone and welcome back. Okay, so I just wanted to share this idea with you. Some of you might like it, some of you might not, but I thought it's a really good idea and it's a great way to upcycle or recycle, repurpose your old sketchbooks. Now I'm sure we've all got plenty of sketchbooks and things like that, and I'm sure, well, I'm not sure, but if like me, I should say, you've got sketchbooks with drawings or paintings in them that maybe you're not proud of, let's say. And maybe you thought about, throwing your sketchbook out because, the content in there is not fantastic and it doesn't inspire you looking at it or anything. Now, I've come up with this idea of recycling some of my old sketchbooks. This is one of my old Moleskine sketchbooks, and as you know, or maybe you don't, but you will know if you saw my Moleskine sketchbook review that I really don't like the paper in these Moleskine sketchbooks. And this is the watercolour Moleskine sketchbook as well, with supposedly watercolour paper in it, but the paper, it really is dreadful. It doesn't lend itself very well at all to painting watercolours, in my opinion. So this sketchbook, it was pretty much half full with watercolour sketches, and they were all very bad. The paper didn't work well. I wasn't inspired working on the stuff, and I just used it basically after a few sheets of watercolour attempts on it. I just kind of used it as a doodle book, just for swatching out colours and just messing about with, really. There was probably half a sketchbook there of little watercolour sketches and doodles, and the other half was just left with clean paper. And I just put this on my bookshelf and I thought, I'm not going to use that again. I'm just going to stick to using the Sea White sketchbooks. Their paper's a lot better, although it's not perfect. It's just a lot better than the Moleskine sketchbook. So I was in two minds whether to throw this out or not, and I thought, well, at least I can use the sheets in the back there just for sketching or messing about on. But then I thought, why don't I reprime the paper in there? Because I don't know if you are aware of this or not. You will be if you paint in acrylics and oils and things like that. But you can paint over watercolour paper with gesso or even PVA glue. That was a tip that I got from Dave Usher, actually. You can paint over old watercolour paintings on watercolour paper with PVA glue or gesso them, and then you can then reuse that paper for acrylic painting or oil painting. And I've also seen oil painters priming MDF boards, hardboard, plywood, that kind of thing, with emulsion paint, household emulsion, to seal the wood so that it provides them with a nice surface to paint acrylic or oil paints on. And I thought to myself, well, I've got a big tin of white emulsion in the shed. It's the matte one. It's not the vinyl silk or anything. It must be the matte one. And I thought, I wonder if I was to paint over the ruined watercolours in this book, and with the emulsion, that is, with the white emulsion, and essentially resurface the paper with the primer, so that I can now paint over them in oil paints. And I thought, yes, I'll do that. That's exactly what I'll do. I've seen oil painters do similar thing on wood and paper. So I thought, well, that's what I'll do. I'll have this as an oil painting sketchbook, because I haven't painted in oils or acrylics for years. I didn't actually like acrylics. I bought some 4 years ago, and that was the first time I ever tried acrylics, and I've probably done less than a dozen paintings with them and thought, no, these are not for me. But, I've ended up, in fact, I've got one here. I've ended up with a great big tube, well, a set of great big tubes, I think 150mm. I'm sure 150mm, yeah, tubes of acrylic paint. I've got about 8 of these, I think. I bought them in a set. I thought, well, I really don't want to waste them. I want to use them for something. So I thought, well, I'll use this for. What I'll do, I'll prime the white paper with white emulsion. I'll do an acrylic underpainting, just block areas in, and then when that's dry I can go over with oil paints and do an oil painting on top, and just have a sketchbook just like that, just to practice in again, just to get me back into the flow of things again. And so what I've done, I actually done that. I set about, I don't even know if you're going to be able to see it. Yeah, you can. Look, it looks a bit rough in certain areas. I need to sand that down a bit there. So basically what I've done, I applied 2 coats of household emulsion, the matte household emulsion, over all of the watercolours that I'd done in this book, and some of the watercolours kind of stretched over 2 pages. Let me find one. I'll find one in a minute. Yeah, there we go. You'll probably see it on that paper there. Some of the paintings I've done kind of stretched over two pages there. So I've painted all of them out on all sides and all surfaces of this book. I've completely got everything back to white again. And what I've done, I put 2 coats on. The first coat I put on, and then I used a hairdryer to dry that quickly. It does make the paper, well, you can see, look, it does make the paper kind of warp a little bit. Nothing more than watercolour would. But it certainly thickens it up, and you can see, look, that I've done half of this sketchbook, probably a little more than half of this sketchbook have been primed. Some of them both sides. Oh, that's that was a test. What was that? Oh yeah, that was Arteza watercolour pencils, wasn't it? Funny enough, I've got something to mention about that in just a minute. That's the only painting I didn't prime over. Everything else is primed now, ready to use for acrylics or oils. Apart from that, I'll leave that as it is. So it does pad the book out a little bit. I don't think you're going to be able to do a complete sketchbook, you know, with 2 coats of primer on all of the pages, because you can kind of see, look, it does make it fairly bulky. Although when the strap's on it in a bookshelf, it's not too bad. So I've got half a sketchbook here. Oh, that was a sneak peek. I'll show you that in a minute. I've got half a sketchbook here that's kind of primed with emulsion, and I found that drying it with the hairdryer really speeds the process up. It just literally 2 minutes with the hairdryer, and you're ready to recoat it again and give it another coat. And I mean, you can just use 1 coat, but I found that 2 coats completely covered the watercolour. But I think if you just wanted to do this on plain white paper, you could just get away with 1 coat of emulsion just to seal it, and that would be fine. But like I say, I've used 2, so I completely obliterate everything that was underneath there. And then again, I went over it with the hairdryer. So it's 2 coats, hairdryer on both coats, and then when it's dry, I got some very fine sandpaper and just gave it a light rub down, just to get rid of any of the little nibs or sort of raised brush marks in there and things like that. And it's actually now a very nice surface to work on. And as you just saw, I have actually worked on it already. You probably recognise that actually. It's a little acrylic sketch. I've simplified the constable drawing that I'm doing of Flatford Mill. I left out the trees that were there and the horse and the boats and all that kind of stuff, and just really simplified it just to a very simple impressionistic acrylic sketch of that painting, just to see if my idea works, you know, if I can actually do that in this sketchbook. And it worked perfectly, and it's actually, like I say, a really nice surface to work on. Now you can just paint directly onto unprimed watercolour paper with acrylics if you want to. I've tried that in the past, but what I've found is the watercolour paper tends to sort of grab the paint. You know, when you're brushing it on, it sort of grabs hold of the paint, and it's really hard to sort of blend it and get even, you know, brush strokes like that, until you've coated the whole paper or the whole picture with acrylic, you know, an acrylic underpainting, and then the paper is naturally going to be sealed, and you can just, you know, paint as normal as you would with acrylics, and it kind of slips a little bit more on the sealed surface, and you can blend it a lot easier. But you know, by priming it first with the household paint, the emulsion, you've not got that problem, and this feels just like canvas or something, so like a ready primed canvas to work on. So I thought, result, I've recycled my old moleskin sketchbook, which to be honest I wasn't ever going to use again for watercolour paper, even though I've got half a pad here of plain watercolour sheets that haven't been primed. I thought, well, this is a great idea, because I've got other sketchbooks like this where I like a lot of the watercolour sketches in them, but there's some I don't. And I thought, well, I don't have to completely obliterate all of the sketchbook. I can just the images, the paintings that I don't like, I can just paint over those with emulsion, and I can turn that into an acrylic painting or an oil painting. And it'll be a really interesting sketchbook. It'll have watercolour in there, acrylic in there, oil painting in there, whatever. So it's a great way to get rid of those failures, watercolour failures in a sketchbook, because if, like me, you have two sketchbooks on the go, which I do. I've explained before. I have one which I never show to anybody. It's just full of really loose scribbles and ideas and notes and things like that, and it's not really worth showing. You don't look at it and think, oh, that's a nice sketch or anything like that. It's just scribble, really bad scribble. And then I have another sketchbook which, well, like we're doing with Sketchbook Corner at the moment, which are all going to be nice finished little sketches, tidy little sketches and very loose drawings, that kind of thing. The kind of sketchbook that you enjoy looking through, and if somebody picked it up and started flicking through it, you wouldn't feel embarrassed about it. I have that kind of sketchbook as well. So you can but they don't always work out like that. Sometimes those presentable sketchbooks, like I say, you can have a few dodgy ones in there which kind of spoil the sketchbook in a way. So this is a really good way of getting a second chance, to do another painting on there. And also it's a second chance to breathe, new life into your old sketchbooks without throwing them away. I don't know if this is going to work on cartridge paper. I presume it would. It might cockle a little bit more, but it's the same principle, isn't it? It's the surface that counts. And if you've got two coats of emulsion paint on cartridge paper or watercolour paper or even cardboard or wood or anything, it's still the surface that counts. It's still a sealed emulsion on there, primed, basically ready for oil painting and acrylics. So I guess we could do the same thing, in our cartridge paper sketchbooks as well. Worth a try. I haven't tried it yet, but I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work. I'm certainly going to try that though. And like I say, I've got other sketchbooks like this, and I'm sure maybe you've got a few of them knocking around as well. That you've thought about clearing out and throwing away. Obviously this information is no good to you at all if you don't paint in acrylic or oils or something. But another thing, maybe you've been curious about painting in acrylics or oil paints or something like that. This would be a great place to start, because acrylics dry very quickly and they're very hard to blend. You have to be quick to kind of blend them out. And working on, you can get retarders to put into the paint which slow the drying time down, and I would recommend those if you're working on a larger scale. But working on this small scale, you really don't need to. And the paint is quite controllable and very easy to handle, on a small A5 sketchbook format. It really is. So it's a great place to start. Now, there is a drawback with using oil paint on these. That can take weeks to dry. So you've got to leave your sketchbook open and let it dry before you can actually, turn the page over and do another one. But if you've got several of these sketchbooks primed, that's no problem. You can work on 2 or 3 sketchbooks at a time. But it's certainly definitely a really good idea for acrylic painting. My intention was to go over this with oils, but I just got carried away with the acrylics. I thought, this is going really well, actually. I can blend the colours out easy because they're not in big areas or anything. So I just continued on with acrylic. And just done this little sketch, and like I say, I've probably done less than 12 acrylic paintings in my life, and after doing this one, I've kind of I can't say rekindled my passion for acrylics again, because it was never there in the first place. It was just a curiosity thing. I thought, I know, I've never tried acrylics, let's buy some, let's try them, just to say that I've done it. And I didn't like them from the word go, so I never really used them. But now they're really growing on me. And I'm really looking forward now to completing, the pages here that I've primed with more little acrylic sketches. I know a lot of you are here for watercolour and graphite, mixed media, that kind of thing. And I know a lot of you that are here probably won't have the slightest interest whatsoever in oil painting or acrylic painting. But I'm sure that there's those of you here that, like me, we try all different mediums and just experiment with everything. And I'm sure, there's some of you there that have got some acrylics and you enjoy acrylic painting. And this will be, a good little idea for you. You might already be doing this, I don't know. But I just thought, for me personally, I thought I've got to share this with you, because if there's anybody out there in the same boat as me, you've put your acrylic paints away or your oil paints away, you tend not to use them anymore, and you've got sketchbooks sitting around with work in them that you're not too thrilled about. I think this is a great way to sort of start using them again, both the paints and the sketchbook. Now, I mentioned earlier about that Arteza butterfly that I'd done in here, didn't I? Wherever it is. Now, as you know, Arteza, they contact me now and again, and they send me art supplies to review for them. And they've just recently contacted me again, and they want me to review some more watercolour paper that they've got and some gouache paints. Now, I've already tested out two of their various kinds of watercolour paper. One that was in the cloth-covered hardbound sketchbooks there. That paper was okay. But they sent me another sketchbook, two sketchbooks actually, with the watercolour pencils. And the watercolour sketchbooks that they sent me were the professional range. Now, the paper that they're sending to me now is called the expert range. Now, I have actually experienced the expert range before. If you remember my review of the watercolour pencils and the paper, I didn't speak very highly of the paper. Although it was a lovely paper to work on, but if you worked on it too much, the sizing started lifting on the paper. And it started bubbling up, and it left all sorts of unsightly marks in the painting. Again, another good candidate for priming with emulsion. There's an idea. But I have actually experienced the expert paper before. Gabor very kindly sent me a sample pack of all different kinds of papers that he was using. And he sent me a note saying, I've put you some Arteza expert paper in there. So the one you reviewed was the professional. He said he hadn't tried the professional, so I sent him some of the professional to try, and we both agreed they're two totally different papers. Apparently the expert is a cotton paper, the professional isn't, it's just a cellulose paper. So the new paper that they're sending me is going to be a really nice paper to work on. I've already actually tried it from the sample that Gabor sent to me, and I really did like that paper actually. It's very nice, so looking forward to that. But they also wanted to send me a 60 set of gouache paint. Now, I nearly turned the offer down because, again, although I've got gouache, I buy the very cheap stuff by Reeves, and I think I've just got 12 tubes of it. I just bought a very basic set of it years ago, and I only ever use it for enhancing watercolours, that kind of thing. I did used to have a set of Winsor & Newton, what were they called? Designer gouache, the artist quality one, back in the day, about 20 years ago. And I did actually use them all up, but I was never very successful with gouache painting. I could never sort of apply the layers without it lifting up. And again, I kind of given up, if you like, on painting with gouache. But I thought, well, there is certainly a use for it with me, with the mixed media painting. So I'll always, have some at hand. But I thought, well, if they're sending me some gouache to review, I've kind of got to do a gouache painting, haven't I? And I thought, well, this could be embarrassing. So I nearly turned it down, but I thought, no. In the spirit of humility, I'm quite happy to humble myself and embarrass myself and probably do a really dreadful gouache painting with it. It hasn't arrived yet, by the way. I haven't even tried it yet. So, but who knows? You know, I might kind of take to it again. Who knows? But that's what I wanted to talk about with this, and I think I'm going to use the rest of this sketchbook, you know, the pages that I haven't primed, because I've got just, you know, a little under half a sketchbook there. That's primed. Yeah, probably just looking at the gap there, probably about half a sketchbook left in this moleskin of unprimed paper. And I thought, well, that'll probably be okay for gouache painting. So I thought, well, I can do a little bit of gouache painting on this. So this sketchbook will be more of a sort of an opaque media sketchbook. So I thought, well, that was timely, you know, because I wasn't sure what I was actually going to do with these pages, but now, you know, I can have a practice with them, you know, with the gouache. So yeah, you've got that to look forward to, you know, watching me have a meltdown on camera while I'm trying to paint gouache there, because I'll obviously do a little painting, and I'll make a video for you about it, and obviously I've got the YouTube video to, you know, the review video to make about it as well. But I think it's going to be nice to have them in stock, because I've got 60 colours to choose from. So it means I've not really got to spend much time mixing them like I do with the 12 colours, the Reeves 12 colours that I've got. So I can just probably literally just pick a tube and just use it neat from the tube for, you know, enhancing some of the watercolours. I only really use it for, you know, little white flowers, that kind of thing. You know, I tend to use it very sparingly throughout the watercolours, but I think I might do a mixed media to review it, and be a bit braver with it, and maybe paint some clouds in with it, and some opaque tree trunks or something in a landscape. I haven't really decided yet, but it'll be fun, whatever I do. And it'll be embarrassing for me as well, because I can't see me doing a nice painting with it. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that to you as, you know, something to look forward to, you know, the review of that. So yeah, there we go. There's not much more I can say really. It's a great way, I think, of and an inexpensive way as well, because the emulsion paint, you've probably already got some, you know, in your house. You know, so you've not got to go out and buy gesso or anything. And I think gesso and emulsion is a very similar thing. And it's not the same, but it's very similar. And it does the same kind of thing. You know, it seals, you know, the porous surface of watercolour paper very nicely. You know, ready for you to work on. So it's a very inexpensive and effective way of recycling, you know, your old sketchbooks. And I was so excited, you know, when I'd done this painting, I thought, this works. It works. I'm really, really pleased, you know, with the idea of it. I have done this before. Like I say, Dave Usher told me about using PVA glue to paint over your watercolour paper. You know, it's like I say, you don't have to confine it to your sketchbooks. You can use it on your big sheets of watercolour paper. You know, and if you ruin them, obviously you can turn them over and work on the back. But if you ruin both sides, you can just paint over them with PVA glue and work on top of them with acrylic. Or, I think better still, I've tried the PVA glue, and it was okay. I didn't really like the surface of it too much, but I prefer the surface of the matte emulsion. So I'm going to, you know, any of your failed watercolours, you can just paint over them with emulsion. And I've got, I don't know if you have or not, but I've got a big pile of watercolour failures upstairs. And I kept them purposely for that, because I thought, well, if I keep them and just paint over them with PVA or gesso, or now in this case, household emulsion, I'll never have to buy another canvas again for acrylic or oil painting. I can just basically work on watercolour paper. And the knot surface is a lovely surface to work on. Once it's been primed, 2 coats of primer, you know, emulsion primer, it's very much like canvas. It's got enough texture there to grip the paint. It's actually a really nice surface to work on. It really is. So I think this is, you know, a great idea. You know, to save some money and reuse some of your art materials again. Okay, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. Maybe you're already doing it. Maybe you've got a better way of doing it than this. I mean, please let me know. I just kind of put 2 and 2 together there from some of the oil painters I'd watched, like Michael James Smith, for example. He uses, I mean, he's a brilliant artist, professional artist. I mean, you can't argue with what he does. You know, he's selling his paintings all over the world, and he's doing this technique, not on paper, but on, I think he's using MDF board, and he primes it in much the same way as I've done here, 2 coats and sands down. I think he might put 3 or 4 coats on, maybe, I'm not sure, but I just put 2 coats on this and a light sanding. And I just thought, well, I wonder if that'll work on paper instead of the PVA glue, and it's absolutely perfect, absolutely perfect. Okay, so I'll leave you with that idea. I'll tag this one in Sketchbook Corner as well, because although it's not a graphite sketch like we're doing, I think it's a useful thing for anybody that's working in a sketchbook, whether it's watercolour paper or cartridge paper. You know, to reprime the paper and you know, save that sketchbook, save that piece of paper in your sketchbook, you know, on cartridge paper or watercolour paper. I think it's a really feasible and a good idea to do. So anyway, I think I've laboured the point way too much. So I'll go now, but I'll leave you with that thought, and I look forward to your comments on this one. Okay, thanks very much for viewing, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.